Hello and welcome to another chapter of the Tao Te Ching. Here we are looking at chapter 70. These teachings. If you're going through this, numerically, this falls at a really good time because we were talking in the last verse about like your right to be upset, your right to do this, your right to do that. And that comes from like intellect and what we've learned and what we're living under the influence of, and that's a difficult argument intellectually to make, where it's like, oh well, I'm smarter than, or I'm bigger than, or I'm more than, or whatever. Like these are difficult things, and what people deserve and what people, all of that kind of stuff. Those are difficult things to answer because the world doesn't work that way, right? The world is neutral in many ways, and these teachings, this chapter, these teachings, talks about it in a different way. It talks about it in a way of like, hey, your intellect can't understand this. Your intellect won't be able. And when we start to have arguments around Tao and what we're supposed to do, or how Tao kind of lays things out, oftentimes we are struck with, oh, well, but what about this, right? That's your intellect. And I won't often get in those conversations. I will get myself away from those conversations as quick as possible, because you can't formulate with your intellect an entire being that is not you, right? You're only working from yourself. So your intellect is really, super subjective. It's all just about you. And we can only surmise things about you from what you're trying to create, the arguments that you're trying to create and stuff like that. And so what we look at when we see this number 70, these teachings, is that it's paradoxical, but this is the verse that you can go to when you are feeling a little like, but I'm trying to understand. Okay, let's look at what it says. These teachings are simple and transform lives, yet mere intellect cannot grasp them. These teachings are older than life and benefit all things, yet people prefer the manifestation. Very few people will ever truly understand what is written herein, but for those few, these pages will guide them to themselves. Meanwhile, they will be labeled as coarse and uncaring. In the manifestation, they are seen as dull and disinterested. Yet, in their heart shines a light for all things. One of the other chapters of the Tao, I don't know which one it is, it says, if you use it, and it might be this one, just might be my translation of it. If you use it, it's endless. It can't, but if you try to understand it, you're lost. And that is how it is for everything. If you try to understand something, you're going to get lost. But if you just allow it to be and, say, interact with it as it is, you can always gain. So these teachings are simple and transform lives, yet mere intellect cannot grasp them. So it's super simple, like, right? You just be, don't do. That's simple enough, right? These teachings are older than life and benefit all things, yet people prefer the manifestation. That means people prefer the conspicuous, right? There is a subtle world that we can tap into, and that is what Tao is trying to get us to engage in. But people prefer the conspicuous. People prefer the obvious. Very few people will ever truly understand what is written herein, meaning the Tao, of course. But for those few, these pages will guide them to themselves. And the reason that I wrote it that way is because I talk about recovering yourself. I talk about this idea, like, it's important to me that people are who they are. And when we talk about who you are Tao, right? You are God. There is no separation between you and God. God isn't somewhere else. God is within you. Meanwhile, they will be labeled as coarse and uncaring. And see, this is the thing: when you get rid of etiquette, when you get rid of desire, when you get rid of all the things that drive manifestation, you realize that, yeah, they're like, you would look at me and say I'm dull because I don't want to go axe throwing or fucking zip lining through the goddamn forest, right? I have no interest in those things, never did. And a lot of people can look at that and be like, man, he's boring. He doesn't want to do these things. Well, I don't like those things, right? I don't like engaging in the manifestation in that way. I don't enjoy those things, right? I make simple food. I don't go to restaurants. There are a lot of things that I don't do because there's nothing in it for me. Like, I've done it all already. I grew up in a city, so I've had all of these experiences of like the manifestation, all of the, oh, so exciting, new things, shiny stuff. Like, that's not where life is. And yet that's what we mean when we say people prefer the manifestation. People prefer, oh, I want more delicious food every day. I want more excitement. I want more carnival rides. I want more of I want more parades. I want, and it's like, well, yeah, okay, you can have those things, but there are subtle things. You don't have to be knocked over the head every day with something. And intellectually, that doesn't make sense, right? Intellectually, well, why would somebody prefer not to want these things? Why would somebody prefer to engage in subtle things when there are obvious things we can engage in? Well, eventually those obvious things do become empty, right? Those are hungry ghosts. We've talked about that. We've mentioned that before. It's a Buddhist phrase that just means things that are going to take, and there's nothing else in it for you, right? In the manifestation, they are seen as dull and disinterested, yet in their heart shines a light for all things. And we've talked about this in other verses. Like, what does it look like to follow Tao? Well, it doesn't look like much. You're just doing your thing. It's not gonna be obvious. Like, that's for you. That doesn't have anything to do with other people, like being able to recognize that you follow Tao. Like, it's not what this is about. These teachings are simple and transform lives, yet mere intellect cannot grasp them. The teachings are older than life and benefit all things, yet people prefer the manifestation. Very few people will ever truly understand what's written herein. But for those few, these pages will guide them to themselves. Meanwhile, they will be labeled as coarse and uncaring. In the manifestation, they are seen as dull and disinterested. Yet in their heart shines a light for all things. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, really. I think when we embrace the manifestation, we can gain attention, we can be famous, we can be beautiful and sexy and all of these things, but none of that matters in Tao. So, if you can measure it, it doesn't matter in Tao. And I think that's, really, it's like, because the intellect wants to see, this is better than this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. That intellect can't appreciate what Tao is because there's nothing to measure. All right. Thank you so much for joining me for this chapter of the Tao Te Ching, chapter 70, these teachings. And until next time, keep recovering yourself.